A father is often imagined as a pillar, a quiet force of strength, guidance, and protection, but not every father fits this ideal. Some fathers carry fragility, fear, or unresolved struggle into the home. Their weakness is not always visible, but it ripples through the lives of those who depend on them. Children notice it in subtle ways: the hesitancy in decisions, the avoidance of conflict, the quiet retreat when responsibility calls. They sense an absence of authority, not always cruelty, but inconsistency, passivity, or uncertainty. This is the psychology of the weak father, a study of human limitation, vulnerability, and the profound impact it can have on children, relationships, and the very sense of home. It is a story of fragility, of emotional gaps, and of the complex human forces that shape a father's presence. A weak father is not always easy to identify. He does not announce himself with loud declarations or obvious failure. Often, he exists in subtler spaces, hesitant gestures, unspoken fears, and choices that reveal uncertainty more than intent. His presence is inconsistent. Sometimes he is there, sometimes he withdraws. Sometimes he speaks, sometimes silence carries more weight than words. Children sense it before they can name it. They notice the indecision, the avoidance of responsibility, the quiet inability to enforce boundaries. They observe hesitation when leadership is needed, the way conflict is sidestepped rather than confronted, the subtle signals that comfort and protection may not always be reliable. These observations are etched early into memory, forming patterns of expectation that can last a lifetime. This weakness is not necessarily cruelty. It does not always come with anger, neglect, or overt hostility. Often, it is absence in a quieter form, a lack of authority, inconsistency in emotional support, and a limited capacity to hold space for the child's needs. There is no deliberate harm, yet the impact is profound. Children intuitively recognize that the ground beneath them shifts unpredictably, that guidance may falter when it is most needed. Behaviorally, weak fathers often appear passive. Decisions may be deferred or avoided entirely. Boundaries that protect and guide children may be vague or inconsistently applied. They may retreat when confronted with stress or challenge, leaving others to navigate responsibility alone. This passivity can create tension in families, as children or partners unconsciously compensate, absorbing the weight of leadership or emotional labor that should be shared. Emotionally, weak fathers may struggle to connect. They may fear intimacy or vulnerability, unsure how to respond to emotional expression in themselves or their children. Moments that require empathy, guidance, or reassurance can feel overwhelming, triggering avoidance rather than engagement. In some cases, they may overcompensate with permissiveness, generosity, or superficial involvement, yet the underlying insecurity remains. The subtlety of this weakness is part of what makes it psychologically significant. It is not always obvious and therefore not always addressed. Family dynamics often adapt around it, creating invisible patterns of adaptation, anxiety, or hyper-vigilance in children. Siblings may take on roles of responsibility, mothers may overcompensate, and children may internalize lessons about self, sufficiency, authority, and risk. It is also important to recognize that weak fathers are human. Many carry their own burdens, fears, or unresolved trauma. Their hesitation may arise from past experiences of inadequacy, learned helplessness, or cultural expectations that they are ill-prepared to meet. Their weakness is both personal and systemic, shaped by the pressures of fatherhood and the societal ideal of unwavering male strength. Recognizing weakness does not mean judgment. It means observation, understanding the subtle cues that define presence and absence. It is noticing when a father's hand hesitates to guide, when his voice softens in uncertainty, when his retreat leaves space that must be filled by others. These moments form the foundation of the child's perception, teaching lessons about reliability, authority, and emotional resilience. Ultimately, recognizing weakness is the first step toward understanding. It illuminates the emotional landscape in which children grow, the relational patterns that shape family dynamics, and the psychological mechanisms that influence both father and child. It is an observation of human limitation, a doorway into the deeper exploration of fragility, fear, and the potential for growth that lies ahead. In understanding weakness, we see both the fragility of the father and the resilience of those around him, the silent interplay between absence and adaptation, fear and responsibility, human limitation, and the quiet hope for change. Weakness does not appear in a vacuum. The father who struggles to embody authority, confidence, or emotional stability often carries a history that quietly shapes his limitations. His fragility is rooted in early life experiences, cultural pressures, and personal vulnerabilities that combine to influence how he navigates fatherhood. Some fathers were raised in homes where emotional neglect or inconsistency prevailed. They may have grown up with caregivers who were distant, unpredictable, or overbearing, teaching them that safety and approval are fragile commodities. In these environments, authority may have been modeled as rigid, punitive, or absent. The child who becomes a father later absorbs these lessons, often unconsciously, and repeats patterns, hesitation, avoidance, or emotional withdrawal, as survival strategies learned long ago. Others carry trauma from adolescence or early adulthood. Experiences of failure, rejection, or humiliation can create deep, seated fear of judgment and inadequacy. This internalized anxiety often manifests in fatherhood as indecision or passivity. The desire to protect children collides with a persistent inner voice. I am not enough. I might fail. I cannot be trusted. The result is withdrawal, avoidance, or inconsistent engagement, not from lack of love, but from fear of replicating past mistakes. Cultural and societal expectations play a subtle but powerful role. Many fathers internalize ideals of strength, stoicism, and unyielding competence. When they fail to measure up, when emotions surface, mistakes are made, or authority is questioned, they feel profound shame. Rather than embracing vulnerability, they retreat. Fragility in this context is both personal and social, a product of lived experience and the weight of impossible standards. Some fathers are shaped by relational dynamics with their own partners or significant others. In households where conflict is frequent or unresolved, or where maternal authority dominates, fathers may unconsciously adopt a passive role to maintain peace. Avoiding confrontation or deferring responsibility becomes a coping mechanism, a way to survive relational tension without directly addressing personal fear or inadequacy. Attachment patterns from childhood also influence paternal fragility. Fathers with insecure or avoidant attachment styles may struggle to provide consistent emotional availability. Their instinct is often to withdraw rather than engage, to minimize vulnerability rather than express it. These patterns are rarely deliberate. They are learned strategies for self-preservation that translate into inconsistent fathering behaviors. Personality traits contribute as well. Some men are naturally cautious, introspective, or sensitive, and when combined with stress, past trauma, or societal pressure, these traits may be interpreted as weakness. Sensitivity is not inherently a flaw, yet in environments that valorize assertiveness and decisiveness, it may become a source of internal conflict and self-doubt. Ultimately, the weak father's fragility is a mosaic of influence, past experience, emotional patterns, societal pressure, and personal temperament. Each thread informs behavior, decision, making, and emotional presence, creating a father who is often loving but inconsistent, present but hesitant, caring but constrained by fear. Understanding these origins does not excuse harm, but it does illuminate the complexity of human limitation. Weak fathers are shaped by forces beyond simple choice, forces that, once recognized, offer insight into behavior, compassion for struggle, and pathways for potential growth. By tracing the roots of fragility, we begin to see that weakness is not simply a personal failure. It is a deeply human condition entwined with history, fear, and circumstance, laying the foundation for the deeper psychological patterns that follow. To understand the weak father, one must explore the invisible architecture of the mind, the psychological mechanisms that shape behavior, influence decisions, and dictate presence. Weakness is rarely a simple choice. It is the product of deep-seated patterns of thought, emotion, and attachment that guide the father's responses to the world. At the core is fear, fear of inadequacy, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood or rejected. This fear manifests subtly, often unconsciously. It may appear as hesitation, avoidance, or reluctance to assert authority. In moments requiring decisiveness, the mind becomes overactive with what-ifs. What if I fail? What if I say the wrong thing? What if my child resents me? The constant evaluation of risk inhibits action, creating the perception, and often the reality, of passivity. Attachment theory sheds light on many of these patterns. Fathers with avoidant or insecure attachment may struggle to provide consistent emotional support, withdrawing in times of stress or intimacy. Emotional regulation becomes a challenge. Vulnerability triggers discomfort. Criticism provokes anxiety, and the instinct is to retreat rather than engage. This psychological wiring can lead to inconsistency in nurturing, boundary setting, and guidance. Cognitive distortions often reinforce weakness. Many fathers internalize negative self-beliefs. I am not capable, I am not strong enough, or I cannot protect my family. These beliefs are rarely conscious, yet they influence thought, behavior, and emotional response. The distorted lens through which the father views himself creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. Lack of confidence begets indecision, indecision begets inconsistency, and inconsistency perpetuates doubt. Fear of judgment also plays a crucial role. Weak fathers are acutely aware of societal expectations and ideals of masculinity, strength, and authority. When reality conflicts with these standards, internal tension arises. The pressure to perform, to embody the perfect father, can lead to avoidance or withdrawal rather than engagement. Ironically, the effort to meet expectations often intensifies the very behavior it seeks to prevent, creating cycles of anxiety and inaction. Emotional repression is another key mechanism. Weak fathers may struggle to identify or express feelings, particularly anger, disappointment, or frustration. Rather than navigating these emotions constructively, they suppress them, leading to passivity or emotional distance. In some cases, this repression may mask deeper needs or insecurities, leaving both father and child in a state of unspoken tension. Personality traits combined with environmental pressures further shape behavior. Sensitivity, introspection, and empathy can become double-edged swords. They allow a father to be aware of emotions, yet they heighten self-consciousness, worry, and hesitation. When paired with stress, trauma, or unresolved childhood experiences, these traits may inadvertently reinforce weakness. Finally, avoidance strategies become habitual. Over time, repeated retreat from challenge, confrontation, or responsibility solidifies neural pathways that favor passivity over action. The mind adapts to safety in withdrawal, comfort in hesitation, and predictability in avoidance. This is not laziness or apathy. It is the brain's learned attempt to protect itself from perceived threats that may be emotional, relational, or internal. The weak father's psychological mechanisms are complex, layered, and deeply human. They intertwine fear, attachment, cognition, emotion, and learned coping strategies into patterns that shape his presence, or absence, in family life. Understanding these mechanisms is not a judgment, but a key to insight. They explain behavior, illuminate struggle, and reveal the potential for awareness, growth, and transformation. The absence of consistent strength in a father is rarely just his story. It becomes a silent narrative in the lives of his children. Children sense what is unspoken. They notice hesitation, indecision, and retreat. They feel the gaps in guidance, the inconsistencies in boundaries, and the uncertainty in emotional availability. These experiences shape their understanding of safety, authority, and self-worth in ways that can last a lifetime. Emotional development is particularly affected. When a father struggles to provide reliable support, children may internalize anxiety, confusion, or self-doubt. They learn early that security is fragile and that emotional needs may not always be met. Over time, this can manifest as hyper-vigilance, emotional withdrawal, or the overassumption of responsibility within family dynamics. Children often become caretakers of their parents' feelings, absorbing tension and stress that should belong to the adult. Self-esteem is subtly shaped as well. A father who hesitates to assert authority, provide encouragement, or model confidence inadvertently sends messages about competence and value. Children may internalize these signals. If the one meant to guide me cannot lead, am I capable? If the person responsible for protection retreats, what does that teach me about trust and safety? These impressions do not always manifest in rebellion or overt distress. Often, they take root quietly, influencing self-perception and relational patterns into adulthood. Social behavior is another domain influenced by paternal fragility. Children may struggle with boundary setting, conflict resolution, or decision making. Without a model of consistent strength, they may overcompensate by asserting themselves aggressively, avoiding responsibility, or relying heavily on peers for guidance. Alternatively, some children mirror the father's passivity, struggling to advocate for themselves or navigate challenges independently. Both outcomes reflect the subtle imprint of inconsistency and unaddressed fear. Interestingly, some children develop resilience as a response. The absence of unwavering guidance can foster self-reliance, problem-solving skills, and emotional independence. Yet this resilience often carries a hidden cost, a deep awareness of vulnerability, a need to compensate for gaps in guidance, and sometimes a quiet longing for stability that was never fully present. They learn to survive, but survival does not replace the benefits of consistent paternal support, trust, and reassurance. The father's emotional unavailability also influences attachment. Children may develop avoidant, anxious, or ambivalent attachment styles, reflecting a subconscious strategy to navigate uncertainty. They may struggle to trust authority, feel discomfort with intimacy, or approach relationships with caution. These patterns often mirror the father's own internal struggles, creating cycles that ripple across generations. It is important to recognize that impact is not simply a product of weakness. It is a product of inconsistency, uncertainty, and absence where presence is needed. Love may exist, but without clarity, boundaries, and emotional reliability, children are left interpreting signals, compensating for gaps, and navigating ambiguity. Ultimately, the weak father shapes more than immediate behavior. He shapes perception, emotional processing, and relational patterns that extend beyond childhood. The subtle lessons of hesitation, retreat, and fear leave an imprint. Children learn that authority can falter, guidance can be uncertain, and emotional presence can be conditional. Yet, even within this impact, there is room for awareness, adaptation, and growth. By understanding the effects of weakness, both father and child gain insight into patterns, vulnerabilities, and the potential for conscious change. Recognizing influence is the first step in breaking cycles, cultivating resilience, and imagining new ways of connection authority, and care. Within the weak father, a quiet tension often simmers, an internal conflict between desire and limitation, between intention and action. He may long to be present, strong, and reliable, yet find himself retreating, hesitating, or avoiding responsibility. This tension is not always conscious, but it shapes every interaction, every decision, and every moment of connection with his children. Guilt is a frequent companion. Fathers aware of their limitations often feel remorse for their perceived failures. They notice the unevenness of their guidance, the missed opportunities to assert authority, or the times when fear outweighed action. Guilt is not simply a negative emotion. It is a signal of awareness, a recognition that the self does not align with the ideal. It can motivate change, but it can also reinforce feelings of inadequacy if unprocessed. Shame often intertwines with guilt. Many fathers internalize societal expectations about masculinity, strength, and competence. When they feel unable to meet these standards, shame arises, a deep, pervasive sense of not measuring up. Unlike guilt, which focuses on behavior, shame attacks identity. I am not enough. This internal dialogue can be corrosive, intensifying hesitation, withdrawal, and emotional distance. Fear is both driver and consequence of these emotions. The weak father fears conflict, failure, and rejection. He may worry that asserting authority will provoke resistance, or that taking responsibility will expose his vulnerabilities. This fear reinforces avoidance, creating cycles in which hesitation feeds guilt, guilt deepens shame, and shame amplifies fear. The result is a psychological loop that is difficult to break without reflection and conscious effort. Cognitive dissonance often accompanies these feelings. The father may believe he should be strong and decisive, yet repeatedly encounters situations where he cannot act in alignment with this belief. The dissonance creates stress, tension, and internal questioning. He observes himself behaving in ways that contradict his ideals, further fueling self-criticism and emotional conflict. Some fathers attempt to compensate through overpermissiveness or surface-level involvement. They may offer material support, indulgence, or superficial engagement to mask emotional absence or passivity. While these actions can provide temporary relief or maintain appearances, they rarely resolve the underlying conflict. The internal struggle remains, quietly shaping interactions and emotional tone within the household. Awareness, however, can be transformative. Fathers who acknowledge their internal conflicts gain the ability to observe patterns rather than be dominated by them. They may recognize triggers, moments when fear or shame is strongest, and begin to respond intentionally rather than reflexively. This conscious observation allows space for growth, offering the potential to recalibrate behavior, build consistency, and deepen presence. Ultimately, the weak father's internal conflict is both a source of limitation and a seed of possibility. It is a mirror reflecting vulnerability, fear, and unresolved experience, but also awareness, reflection, and potential for transformation. Within this tension lies the capacity for change, the opportunity to bridge the gap between desire and action, intention and reality, weakness and the emergence of measured strength. The psychology of internal conflict illuminates the human complexity behind paternal weakness. It shows that struggle is not simply external, it resides within, shaping perception, emotion, and behavior. And by understanding these inner landscapes, we begin to see pathways toward awareness, growth, and conscious fatherhood, even where fragility has long been present. Fragility in fatherhood is not fixed. It is a pattern that can shift through awareness, reflection, and deliberate action. Even a father who has long struggled with hesitation, avoidance, or emotional distance can find pathways toward presence, consistency, and relational depth. Change begins not with perfection, but with conscious acknowledgement of limitation. The first step is self-awareness. A father must recognize his patterns of avoidance, hesitation, and inconsistency, not to assign blame, but to observe behavior honestly. Awareness allows him to identify moments when fear drives action, when insecurity shapes responses, and when emotional withdrawal has become a default strategy. This clarity is both gentle and powerful. It provides the opportunity to choose differently. Emotional regulation is equally important. Weak fathers often struggle to process fear, guilt, or shame, which can unconsciously guide their behavior. By developing the ability to notice emotions without being dominated by them, a father gains the capacity to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. Moments of conflict, stress, or parenting challenge can then become opportunities for engagement rather than withdrawal. Building competence through small, deliberate actions is another pathway. Change does not occur through grand gestures, but through consistent, intentional behavior. Setting clear boundaries, following through on promises, or actively participating in children's lives. However, modesty forces both presence and trust. Each act becomes a building block, slowly reshaping internal narratives of inadequacy into lived experience of reliability. Reflection and mentorship can amplify growth. Fathers who seek guidance through personal reflection, counseling, or supportive communities gain insight into their own limitations and strengths. They observe patterns of previous generations, understand the sources of their fear, and explore strategies for nurturing presence. Learning to articulate challenges without shame fosters resilience and reduces the likelihood of repeating patterns unconsciously. Vulnerability, paradoxically, becomes a strength. Weak fathers often avoid exposing their own uncertainty, fearing judgment or loss of authority. Yet intentional vulnerability, acknowledging mistakes, expressing emotion, and seeking connection, builds authenticity and trust. Children respond not to perfection, but to presence and transparency, demonstrating that imperfection can coexist with responsibility, provides profound modeling for resilience, empathy, and integrity. Consistency is central. Occasional attempts to engage without follow-through can reinforce patterns of uncertainty for both father and child. Growth requires steady practice, a commitment to showing up, making decisions, and being emotionally available. Over time, consistent presence recalibrates family dynamics, strengthens trust, and reshapes children's internal models of authority and security. Change is not linear. Relapse into avoidance, hesitation, or self-doubt is natural. Yet each instance becomes an opportunity to observe, reflect, and recommit. Progress is measured not by the absence of weakness, but by the ongoing effort to move toward conscious, intentional fatherhood. Even small shifts accumulate, creating significant transformation over time. Ultimately, the possibility for change affirms the human capacity for growth. The weak father is not condemned to failure. He is invited to awareness, choice, and intentional engagement. Through reflection, courage, and deliberate action, he can cultivate presence, reliability, and emotional depth, providing children not just care, but a model of conscious, evolving fatherhood. In recognizing possibility, we see that weakness is not destiny. Fragility can be reshaped, patterns recalibrated, and absence transformed into presence. Even the most hesitant father can learn to stand, not as an infallible pillar, but as a human being striving toward trust, love, and consistent engagement with those who rely on him most. There is a quiet story in the presence of a weak father. It is a story of imperfection, hesitancy, and fear, but also of humanity, struggle, and the potential for transformation. His life reminds us that strength is not simply inherited, nor is weakness a permanent sentence. It is lived in the moments between intention and action, in the tension of desire and limitation. Children often remember not only what was done, but what was absent. They notice hesitation, the subtle retreats, and the gaps in guidance. Yet, within this absence lies a paradox. Even weakness teaches lessons. about resilience, self-reliance, and the complexity of human character. A father's fragility can mirror their own potential vulnerabilities, creating awareness, caution, and sometimes quiet empathy for the imperfect nature of those we love. The weak father's journey is not one of failure alone. It is a journey of awareness. Many fathers carry guilt, shame, or fear, yet within these emotions exists the possibility for growth. When a father recognizes his limitations, he begins to bridge the gap between desire and action. Each choice to engage, each effort to remain present, becomes an act of courage, a quiet rebellion against the inertia of fear. Fragility and strength are not opposites, they are intertwined. Awareness of weakness allows for intentional action. Vulnerability becomes a pathway to authenticity. Presence becomes a form of courage, and effort becomes a quiet demonstration of care. In striving to overcome hesitation, the father models resilience, not perfection, but the human capacity to acknowledge limitations and continue forward. There is also forgiveness embedded in this story. Children, partners, and fathers themselves may learn to see weakness with empathy, recognizing the human complexity behind passivity or retreat. The weak father is not defined solely by absence. He is defined by presence in the moments he chooses to show up, by effort amid fear, and by the persistent striving to connect and guide. Over time, fragility can transform into measured strength. Patterns of hesitation and withdrawal can be replaced by deliberate engagement, consistent emotional availability, and reliable guidance. Growth is slow, often imperceptible day to day, yet cumulative in its impact. Each small step, acknowledging a mistake, holding a child's hand, asserting a boundary, or sharing an emotion, contributes to a quiet evolution, reshaping the father's presence and the family's experience. Ultimately, the psychology of the weak father is a study in complexity. It is a reminder that human beings are neither wholly strong nor wholly weak. They are a tapestry of experience, vulnerability, fear, and aspiration. Weakness is not the end of the story. It is a chapter, a challenge, and a door to possibility. It can coexist with love, care, and meaningful influence, shaping lives even as it reveals limitations. In reflection, the weak father teaches us something profound: that imperfection does not preclude value, that fear does not prevent growth, and that conscious effort, humility, and reflection can transform even frailty into a source of understanding, connection, and quiet strength. His journey reminds us that parenting is not about flawless execution. It is about presence, awareness, and the human courage to persist despite limitation. And in this awareness, there is a poetic truth. The weak father, in striving, in hesitating, in learning, leaves a mark that is deeply human. Not of perfection, but of presence. Not of certainty, but of effort. Not of invulnerability, but of enduring care. And in that mark lies the possibility for transformation, for healing, and for a legacy that transcends fear, hesitation, and imperfection.